Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we'll be talking all about DPS. We'll be looking at melee DPS, range DPS, single target DPS, and environments like Mythic Plus and which classes are performing well, the positive, the negative things of specs, classes and things like that. We'll be looking at SimulationCraft, explaining what it is, explaining what are the drawbacks, what are the advantages of actually using it. We'll do it all together today. I won't be looking through every single class, keep that in mind, because it will take a really long time. We'll be talking about classes that I've played with, that I've seen them do really good numbers in terms of AoE, single target and things like that. Now, first of all, SimulationCraft. The people who have never seen, or the people who don't know what SimulationCraft is, it's basically computer generated DPS ranking based on very specific niche scenarios. So first of all, this is going to take into account a couple of things that are probably not going to be viable in real World of Warcraft scenarios. Things like, this assumes that you are performing your rotation to the max, as in you don't make any mistakes. So there's no mistakes made in terms of the rotation. Second, it assumes it is a patchwork style fight, so that means it's single target and there's no movement whatsoever. Again, these kind of fights are very rare. And lastly, it also assumes that there are certain things that are going to be perfected, or it's going to be a perfect environment for your certain class. Like example, we can look at the Windwalker Monk here, and we can see that Touch of Karma ends up doing 12% of the damage. Anyone who plays the Windwalker Monk knows that Touch of Karma can be somewhat iffy in terms of utilization. It can be extremely strong if you know how to really min-max it. But on certain boss fights, it's not really that great. So it assumes the best for every single spec. And this is what the chart looks like right now. You see Windwalkers being really strong. You see Rogues, Mages, Demon Hunters, Affliction Warlocks, and a lot of different classes doing really well. You see there at the bottom that Balance and Feral Druids. Ferals have kind of climbed up a little bit with the last recent changes. But keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. This is not an overall overview of what is the best. There's so many different things that can change, like I mentioned before. Right now what we're doing, we're looking at entry level gear rating charts, and we're kind of comparing what the single target is like. Now, there's not much surprise to really see Rogues here, because Rogues have overall been performing extremely well. If I were to say, or if someone new who's playing World of Warcraft and they're looking to play a class that's going to be amazing in raids or 5-man situations, that they can get better with, and they kind of hope that they're never gonna get, they're always gonna be viable, I would probably say Rogue right now. Rogue has never felt better, because all of the 3 specs are completely viable. Of course, Subtlety and Outlaw are kind of pushing ahead in terms of, that Mythic Plus viability, but Assassination is really not that far behind. So Rogue is doing really well right now, and it's one of the best melee, if not the best classes to play if you really want to push that rating or Mythic Plus situations. Now, it's not really surprising to see Arcane Mages doing quite well in single target. Arcane Mages can somewhat be viewed as a more simplistic rotation, where mana management is actually a thing for a DPS class. For some people, that's actually a really cool concept. For others, it's like, I don't want to manage that. But it's kind of cool to see Arcane Mages pushing for that top single target spot right now. You also have to keep in mind that Frost Mages, even though they're kind of middle of the pack for single target, Frost Mages are arguably one of the best, or one of the most wanted classes for Mythic Plus. Not only because of their utility, which comes through Blizzard's slow, which arguably is one of the best ways to keep mobs slowed down. So your tank will pull tons of mobs and they'll be kited. Mage will use Blizzard, all works well and things like that. On top of the fact that they provide, party buffs and things like that, they also have one of the best burst AoE potential, definitely from the ranged camp. They have one of the best burst AoEs, which can be very strong, especially considering certain Mythic Plus affixes. Now, Fire being a little bit behind everyone else in terms of the mage specs, especially in PvE environment. So right now, probably Arcane and Frost are the ones that are being quite dominant, and Fire is being a little bit down below them. Now, again, not surprising to see the Havoc Demon Hunters being quite strong. Havoc Demon Hunters, even though in Legion they were probably mid-tier to some extent, they were still very popular Mythic Plus pick. Right now, Havoc Demon Hunters can have really strong single target if they spec and they use this, you know, specific gear for it. And they can also have probably, I'm gonna say probably one of the best burst AoE potentials out of any class in the game. Again, pretty strong. Affliction, to some extent, has been now guaranteed, or people are pushing towards Affliction being as the best Warlock spec. Now, in beta, in previous videos, Demonology Destruction was doing really well, but a lot of nerfs to those specs have kind of pushed Affliction to the top. Now, it'll be very interesting to see whether Demonology or Destruction will come back to certain scenarios, 2 targets, 2 bosses, or whatever. But right now, Affliction is probably in the best position it's been since beta. So it'll be interesting overall. Retribution Paladins have been somewhat an underdog in Legion, being somewhat mid-tier if you look at logs and things like that. It's interesting to see Retribution being kind of one of the top DPS right now, even to an extent that Blizzard has even nerfed Paladins in the last month or something like that. So it'll be somewhat, I don't know, I'm actually not 100% sure where Retribution will turn out in terms of rating and Mythic Plus potential. It might be one of those classes that kind of come out of nowhere and be one of the top or something. I'm not sure right now. Now, in terms of Warriors have been strong. Arms arguably have been the more popular pick. Arms had very strong burst AoE potential at the start of beta, at the start of the patch. I mean, Bladestorm was super broken. It has been nerfed several times, so the burst potential has been toned down a little bit. It's still very strong, and Arms Warriors do very good damage. And then you have things like, you know, the mid-tier of the pack. You have Enhancement Shamans, Hunters, and things like that. Enhancement Shaman, to some extent, was the best single target DPS spec in Taurus. In Taurus, it was incredibly great as single target. And Enhancements are still doing really well in terms of single target. Now, I fully expect Enhancement, Elemental, and probably Shadow Priest getting some kind of reworks in the next coming months or the next coming patches. So I don't really want to go into their utility or their positive, negative things yet, because I feel that's gonna change very soon. In terms of Hunters, there's been certain specs that are doing really strong. Survival has been changed, and a lot of people would say it's been changed for the better. It's more fun, more rewarding, and it's doing really well in terms of DPS. And now in terms of other Hunter specs, one of the most noticeable nerfs, if you want to call that a nerf, is that their Battle Res pet is no longer available, so you're no longer able to provide Battle Res and say as a certain Hunter spec in the dungeon, which actually is quite noticeable because a lot of the top rank DPS classes, they don't really bring Battle Res, and it might be hard, or let's say a certain class will probably guarantee its position in a Mythic Plus squad because they bring Battle Res, so that's kind of noticeable as well. So now let's talk Mythic Plus. Let's talk Mythic Plus. Let's talk about different compositions in terms of DPS, in terms of single target, in terms of AoE, in terms of ranged and melee. So let's assume you have a 5-man squad with 1 tank, 1 healer. Hopefully there's gonna be 1 healer, no 4 DPS comps. You never know. But either way, let's hope 1 tank, 1 healer, and 3 DPS. Now let's assume there's going to be 2 ranged DPS with 1 melee DPS. In MDI, there was a really weird thing where most of the European countries went with like 3 melee or melee heavy comp, and North American countries went with like 2 ranged. So there has been some weird comp preference towards melee heavy or ranged heavy depending on where you're from. But that might change. Let's assume you have something like 2 ranged DPS, because being melee is hard. There's a lot of dungeons that are really kind of annoying towards melee DPS. So we'll have to see. We have to assume this. There's also party raid buffs. There's also a lot of buffs that will give synergy towards certain classes. First of all, you have Arcane Intellect from Mages, you have Power Word Fortitude from Priests, you have Battle Shout from Warriors. Now, all of these 3 buffs that I mentioned, you can get a weaker version from Inscription. So you can't bring it to your party without having to bring those classes. Now, Monks bring 5% physical damage increase, and Demon Hunters bring 5% magical damage increase, which cannot be bought from an auction house. So to some extent, maybe Monks and Demon Hunters are already a little bit ahead in terms of utility that they can bring, or at least this party raid buff can be viewed as a significant utility addition. We'll have to see. I don't know. I'm kind of guessing at the moment. So let's look at really strong melee classes, and that is, first of all, rogues are extremely strong right now. Rogues don't bring a party rate debuff, but what they do is they bring amazing DPS. Subtlety is insane right now. Outlaw is insane right now. Assassination is really good as well. Like, we're talking about rogue taking up like the top spots, or the 3 specs of rogue taking up the top spots in terms of DPS, and that is insane. You also have to consider that rogues are arguably the tankiest of melee DPS, or at least they have the most survivability tools, so they can soak things, they can survive things, they might not die and things like that. And it's really important because melee DPS usually get hit more, or at least there's more things to dodge, depending. I'm very generalizing here, but having good personal cooldowns as a melee is quite important, and rogue brings that. You have Shadow Concealment again, which is, Shadow Concealment is something that is absolutely needed for really top end Mythic Plus teams, and probably gets misused at lower end, where people don't even care about Shadow Concealment. Again, it's one of those kind of things where top end players will absolutely utilize this to an extreme extent. Again, you cannot go wrong with a rogue in BfA right now. Another melee class that I feel is really strong right now, I probably have to cover Havoc Demon Hunters. Havoc Demon Hunters have been quite strong in the beta recently, especially with the latest buffs that happened like a month ago, something like that. They're very strong in terms of single target and AoE. They do have to change certain things in order to be better at that, but that's not a big deal. Most of the classes will have to do that, and especially with the fact that in Mythic Plus, you no longer will be able to swap gear or talents. You never were able to swap talents anyway. You'll have to pick which one you want to focus on, you know, AoE or single target. Havoc Demon Hunters provide one of the best party rate buffs in terms of 5% magical damage. They have an AoE stun still. There's very few classes that have AoE stun, so having an AoE stun is really strong. They have Dispel Magic in the form of Consume Magic. This is something new that happened to Havoc Demon Hunters. All of a sudden you can actually dispel magic effects from enemies, and this is extremely strong because there's so many mobs that are considered as the hardest part of the dungeon. Trash mobs have been increasingly becoming the most difficult part of the dungeon. Being able to negate certain mechanics is really strong, and that's, believe me, it's better than it actually sounds. It's going to be utilized by a lot of Havoc Demon Hunters. So there is a lot of things that Havoc actually brings. Now I could mention a lot of other certain melee classes, but I'm probably gonna focus with the top 2, or at least the ones that I feel are really strong. I could have mentioned Arms Warriors, they're being very strong, and burst potential and things like that. I could have probably mentioned some certain DKs, or maybe even Red Paladin and things like that. I feel Red Paladins are becoming a little bit better as well. But overall, I feel the rogues, you can't go wrong with rogue or having Demon Hunter right now. They're extremely top tier in my eyes. Now, in terms of ranged DPS, there's been quite a few ranged DPS that have been quite strong. Can't go wrong with a Frost Mage. Even though Frost Mage does not provide the best single target damage, the burst, AoE burst potential is arguably one of the best in the game, especially for ranged DPS. It's really strong. It provides a decent party-wide buff, Arcane Intellect, and things like Spell Steal. Again, Spell Steal, really strong because there's a lot of dungeons that have these kind of little gimmicky mechanics where, you know, mobs will have this buff that increases their damage by loads, and being able to Spell Steal is going to be a significant increase. And I can name at least a couple of dungeons that have that. So, again, Frost Mage, utility through the Blizzard, slow and things like that is still really strong. Now, another range DPS that I feel is really strong as well, Affliction Warlocks. Again, it's kind of interesting to notice Affliction Warlocks because Affliction Warlocks used to have that, you know, that legendary ring they used to apply slow. Now kind of Frost Mage has taken that. Frost Mages with Blizzard are doing that utility, and Affliction Warlocks are there as kind of, you know, they provide good DPS. They have things like Hellstones, they have things like Portals. They are the only class that I actually mentioned right now that provides a battle res. This is why I mentioned this, because battle res is really important, and there's really not that many top tier classes, or at least the people considered to be top tier, that provide battle res. And all of a sudden having battle res might get you invited to that top end Mythic Plus team as a certain class. So you have to look at that as well. So overall, Affliction Warlocks are strong. If I really wanted to go more into range DPS, I could have mentioned things like, you know, Boomkins. Boomkins become increasingly stronger the longer the mobs live, especially through the extra power of dots. You also have a look at things like, you know, Mass Silence is really strong as well if you can utilize it. I could also have a look at certain Hunter classes as well. But overall, I feel I included the classes or the specs that I felt were really strong right now. Again, I don't want to make this video too long. Hopefully it is not too long. Again, I missed out on a lot of different specs and different classes. I mentioned the ones that I felt they were quite strong right now. You can't really go wrong with those at the moment. Again, things can change, things will change. Let me know how you feel about this list. Let me know how you feel about the classes that you feel are sleeper classes or that are going to emerge as one of the top Mythic Plus DPS classes. I really want to know your opinions. Leave a comment below. If you like the content, please subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in my next video.